Welcome to this explainer. If you're just stepping into the world of finance and getting ready to set up your very first investment portfolio, you're probably feeling a real mix of genuine excitement and, well, let's be honest, a pretty significant amount of anxiety. And hey, that is perfectly okay. I'm here as your guide today to help you navigate those overwhelming feelings. We're going to unpack some absolutely powerful concepts and look at some fascinating historical data that's really designed to soothe those common beginner fears. My goal here is to give you the confidence you need to take control of your financial future.
Right out of the gate, we need to talk about the absolute most common dilemma for beginners. Should I invest now or, wait for the market to drop? This is literally the ultimate beginner's paralysis. You've worked incredibly hard for your money, so the most natural, completely valid fear in the world is that the very second you finally put your hard-earned cash into the market, prices are going to suddenly plummet and you'll immediately lose money. It's a terrifying thought, right? And it stops millions of people from ever building wealth. But we're going to look at why that fear, while perfectly normal, really shouldn't dictate your actions.
Okay, so let's dive into a foundational strategy that is, frankly, a total game changer for beginners. It's called dollar cost averaging, or DCA for short. The concept is incredibly straightforward. You invest a fixed amount of money at regular intervals, completely ignoring what the market is doing. Just imagine setting up an automatic system to invest, say, exactly $500 on the first of every single month into an index fund. It doesn't matter if the news is screaming that the market is hitting all-time highs or if it's crashing. You just let it invest. The absolute beauty of this method is that it entirely removes human emotion from the equation, and the key benefit is right there in the name: averaging. When stock prices are high, your $500 naturally buys fewer shares. When prices are low, boom, your $500 automatically buys more shares. You aren't guessing, you're just gradually and peacefully building your portfolio. On the flip side of that, we have buying the dip. Now, the logic behind this is undeniably appealing. Instead of investing consistently, you hold on to your cash and you wait. You wait to invest only when stock prices experience a noticeable decline. You're essentially waiting for the stock market to go on sale. And who doesn't love a great discount? But here is the massive hidden danger in this approach. Trying to predict when a dip actually hits its true bottom is notoriously difficult. Even highly trained professional investors struggle to time the market. You might see a 5% drop and buy, only to watch it drop another 10%. Or even worse, you might sit on the sidelines waiting for a 10% drop and the market simply rebounds and keeps going up, leaving you and your uninvested cash completely behind. To really wrap our heads around how these two mindsets play out, let's picture a fictional scenario featuring two investors, Alex and Jordan. They're both starting the year with $6,000 to invest. Alex decides to use the dollar cost averaging method. Alex sets up a system to invest $500 on the first of every month, like clockwork, resulting in 12 steady contributions. Jordan, on the other hand, decides to try and buy the dip. Jordan hoards the entire $6,000 in cash, deciding to wait for a market correction of at least 10% before finally jumping in.
Let's see how this actually plays out across a hypothetical year. At the start of the year, both Alex and Jordan are sitting on their $6,000. In the first quarter, the market hits a rough patch and drops by 8%. Jordan looks at the charts, assumes it's going to fall even further to hit that 10% target, and decides to keep holding on to the cash. But then, mid-year, a surprisingly positive economic report comes out. The market quickly rebounds and starts a strong upward trend. Actually, it never reaches Jordan's 10% goal at all. By the end of the year, Alex is fully invested. By buying consistently through the early drop and the later rise, Alex captured the average growth of the entire year. Jordan, however, is incredibly frustrated, still sitting completely in cash, having missed the entire ride.
Now, that fictional story is helpful, but you might be wondering how this actually holds up in the real world over, say, decades. Well, we're going to look at some hard empirical evidence. This is a genuinely fascinating study conducted by Charles Schwab. They analyzed the performance of the S&P 500 over a 20-year period, from 2003 all the way through 2022. They created 5 hypothetical investors, gave each of them $2,000 annually, and had them deploy that cash using completely different investment strategies to see who came out on top. Keep in mind, this 20-year stretch wasn't just smooth sailing. It included the 2008 financial crisis and the 2020 pandemic, periods of intense market turbulence. What is really fascinating is how these different strategies performed over those 2 chaotic decades. Think about Peter Perfect for a second. A mythical investor with the superpower of perfectly timing the market every single year, always investing at the absolute lowest point. He ended up with over $138,000. But I want you to pay close attention to Matthew Monthly. Matthew simply used dollar cost averaging, dividing his $2,000 into 12 equal monthly contributions. Matthew walked away with over $124,000. He never tried to time a single dip or guess the market's direction, yet his boring, automated method performed remarkably close to the absolute impossible standard of perfect timing. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that steady consistency is literally a financial superpower.
So the crucial point is this specific number right here, 44,130. This was the dismal final balance of the last investor in the Schwab study, Larry Linger. Larry represents the ultimate procrastinator. He's the investor completely paralyzed by that fear we talked about at the very beginning. He stayed parked in cash, waiting endlessly for the perfectly safe moment to enter the market, a moment that never came. This number highlights the devastating, real-world financial costs of letting the fear of a market drop keep you sitting on the sidelines.
To make that point even starker, let's compare Larry Linger, who waited in cash, to another investor in the study, Rosie Rotten. Now, Rosie had the absolute worst timing imaginable. Every single year for 20 years, she managed to invest her $2,000 on the day the market hit its absolute highest peak, the literal worst day of the year to buy. Yet look at the comparison. Rosie ended up with $121,000 compared to Larry's $44,130. The shocking truth here is that even the investor with the absolute worst timing in the world massively outperformed the investor who was too paralyzed by fear to invest at all. Just being in the market is far more powerful than timing your investments.
And this brings us to a massive component of building wealth that often gets entirely overlooked, the mental game. We have to talk about the psychology of wealth. Why do our brains struggle so much with the idea of buying the dip? Well, as we've discussed, on a piece of paper, it sounds incredibly smart to wait for a discount. But in reality, that strategy completely ignores human psychology. It ignores the intense emotional distress and sheer anxiety that kicks in when your actual money is on the line and the financial news is screaming that the sky is falling.
When a market drop finally arrives, you can see how panic instantly replaces logic. You might sit there today and plan to be a rational investor who eagerly buys stocks when they go on sale. But when the market actually tanks, nervous beginners, instead of executing their brilliant plan to buy, just freeze up. Even worse, the fear takes over completely, and they end up selling their existing investments at a loss just to make the anxiety stop. Or they revert to being Larry Linger, procrastinating on investing entirely until things feel safe again. Dollar cost averaging acts as a psychological shield against every single one of these traps.
If you're still feeling a bit overwhelmed, I want you to just take a deep breath and think about this quote from Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest, most successful investor in modern history. He says, for the vast majority of people, the smartest thing to do is consistently invest in a low-cost index fund. It really is that straightforward. You don't need a complex secret algorithm, and you certainly don't need a crystal ball to predict market dips. Taking the boring, emotionless, incredibly consistent path is exactly what the absolute legends of finance recommend for nearly everyone.
Which leads us to our final, defining question for you to consider as you step forward into your investing journey. Will you try to time the market, enduring the stress, the anxiety, and very likely falling short of your goals? Or will you remove the emotion, implement a steady plan, and simply let time do the heavy lifting for you? The data from the past 20 years is crystal clear. The most successful approach for the vast majority of us is to automate our investments, ignore the daily noise, and focus on the long term. Don't let fear hold you back. Your future self will be incredibly grateful that you simply decided to get started.